Greetings, everyone. Once again, it's Mota Mwanedi sharing the authentic truth brought to us by Zulula 100, the only teacher. Today, the teaching I will share in English is going to be regarding the mystery of obscurity, the origin of darknesses. It was a teaching, powerful teaching that was given to us by Zulula 100. And for this teaching, it will be in Kalata Dubise, so the authentic version of the book of Enoch, and also in Bibèl, Kalata Mbale, the only authentic Bible without any errors or contradiction. And I shall translate for us here in English. Many people don't know the origin. What is the origin of obscurity, of darknesses? Many people are afraid of the dark, are afraid to sleep in the dark, and are also scared to die because they don't know what's behind, what is waiting for them out there in the darkness, in the obscurity. Some people also think that they are evil spirit hiding in darkness, and they are scared. That's why some people, when they sleep, they don't want to turn the light off. They want to keep the night lamp. Darkness. What is darkness? Darkness is the absence of light, obscure, tenebrous. Some claim that darkness and obscurity are two different things. Other people will also claim that darkness is profound obscurity. If darkness is profound obscurity, then what is obscurity? Question mark. You have to understand that darkness and obscurity are the same thing, but it depends on where you are, where we are. It depends on the degree of initiation. And we know that Zulula 100, the only mandated teacher, is well placed to reveal to us the origin of darknesses, of obscurity. And you have to understand that the revelation he has given us, obscurity and darkness are the same thing, like I've mentioned, but it depends on the degree of initiation. It depends on where you are. And in the original language, which is the Douala, the ancient Douala, obscurity is muititi, also Budu or Bulu. So let's go in Bebotedi regarding the creation of the visible. Bebotedi origin chapter 1 verse 2, it says here in Bibèl, which I will translate. Massima Wase, planet Earth, was a mass of primordial fluid water without physical life and was suspended in the immensity of the visible universe, period. So you are told here that the Earth was suspended in the immensity of the universe, and we know that the universe is dark, is tenebrous, is obscure, and the Earth is inside of it. The stars, the sun, the moon, and so on are contained in the visible. It says here, visible universe that we can see. So we can see that darkness. We can see that obscurity. So if we can see that obscurity, what is the origin of that obscurity, of that darkness? It says here, after the period, in Bebotedi, origin 1-2, mysterious obscurity covered the very deep chasm, and the manifestation of the will of Loba by his verb was still exercising its generating talent above the primitive water beyond the great veil out of the universe, period. So, I'll repeat here. Mysterious obscurity covered the very deep chasm. Before I go any further, what is the very deep chasm? Because the very deep chasm, we have to understand that inside the universe, it's the very deep chasm. It's a very deep abyss. That deep chasm, that abyss, it's dark. So that's inside the universe. So the very deep abyss is where the stars are, where the earth is, where the sun, the moon, so inside the universe. So inside the universe, like I mentioned, is what is called the very deep abyss, we are similar to the fact that we are inside the earth. The earth is also inside that very deep abyss. Now, what is out of the universe? Because it says, mysterious obscurity covered the very deep chasm. So the obscurity covered the very deep chasm, covers the universe. And the manifestation of the will of Loba by his verb was still exercising its generating talent above the primitive water, beyond the great veil, in bracket, out of the universe. So out of the universe, out of that very deep chasm, the manifestation of the will of Loba, by his verb, was still exercising. So was still at work out of the universe, out of the visible universe, out of what we can see, out of the darkness. It was still at work, it was creating. Thus, comma, 7 mighty entities of the great order of things began to pat above the primitive water beyond the great veil, comma. So you're told here that 7 mighty entities, so entities of the great order of things, began to pat above that primitive water. So above the universe, beyond the great veil, because the universe is a great veil, because you cannot see what's behind, so it's a veil. It hides things. It's obscure, it's dark. There were ineffable noises and voices that is not allowed to a man to express. So, out of the universe, out of the very deep chasm, out of the great veil, there were noises and voices. What were those noises? What were those voices? You're told here that those noises, those voices, are not allowed, is not allowed to a man to express. So it's something, and he says ineffable noises. So it's something a man cannot say, cannot repeat, because it's beyond the condition of the visible. It's beyond the condition of our reality. What is outside of that universe? Because some will claim that the sun, the light of the sun gives life. But you're told that even beyond the universe, because when it says there were noises, voices, so there were life. Because the spiritual realm is beyond the condition of the visible. And there are life. There is existence beyond the great veil. And that's a mystery. And the great veil, the obscurity, the darkness hides, contain the reality and hides what's behind. So you're told that the generating talent, so the manifestation of the will of Loba, was still at work out of the universe. And the sun was not manifested yet. So the sun cannot be the one that manifests life. No, there were life before. Bebote dit, Origin chapter 1 verse 5. It says, the manifestation of the will of Loba designated this light, this light, intelligible living energy, under the name of Bunya, universal phenomenic manifestation, and this obscurity, inaccessible existence, under the name of Budu, the term and the start, of the first phenomenal manifestation, period. So there was an evening and there was morning. It was the first day in the visible. So here we shall go step by step. You're told here in verse 5, the manifestation of the will of Loba designated, this light. And this light is uppercase L. So that's the initial light. That's not the light of the sun, no. Designated this light, intelligible living energy. So the light of the beginning is alive. It's intelligible. It's an energy. Under the name Bunya, universal phenomenic manifestation, And this obscurity, uppercase O, comma, inaccessible existence, comma. So you're told here that obscurity is an inaccessible existence. It's something man cannot access, cannot comprehend, cannot understand. And it's an existence, so it's alive. It's conscious. Under the name Buddhu, comma. So that obscurity, under the name Buddhu, comma. The term and the start, comma. What does it start with the term and not the beginning and the start? And not the beginning and the end. What does it start with the term? The term is the end, is the finality. That means it's over, is the finish line. So why the obscurity is the finish, is the term, is the end? You have to understand that before the visible creation, before the visible reality, there is the spiritual realm, the spiritual reality, the great order of things. So the great order of things, for the entities, the visible reality, that's the end. That's the finish. That's the term. Because it is the end of the creation. Because that creation of the obscurity, that's the finality for the entity of the great order of things. And the start, comma, and the start is similar to when you sleep. For example, so at the end of the day, you're tired, you go to sleep. To go to sleep, you have to first enter obscurity. So that's the end. You see? You enter obscurity, so that's the end. And then you begin to dream. In your sleep, you're dreaming. That means that's the start. And your dream has a beginning. So the visible reality has a beginning. And that beginning start with it's the term, is the end for the entity of the great order of things. And then it starts. And it is also in the sleep, in that darkness that you grew up. So, the visible creation, the creation of the visible for the entity of the great order of things, that's the end. That's the finality. Bebote dit, Origin, chapter 1, verse 18. To represent in the day and in the night, comma, and to operate the movement of separation between the path of light and that of obscurity, comma, period. And that of obscurity. And the manifestation of the will of Loba considered that it was pleasant, period. So there are two paths, the path of light and the path of darkness. And you are told here that to represent in the day and in the night, and to operate the movement of separation, that means you separate them between the path of light and that of obscurity. So it's similar to regarding Moto and Muto, the first man and the first woman. The first man is there first, and he will represent the obscurity. And out of him comes out the woman, the first woman. And she will represent the light, because obscurity is there first, and then the light comes out of that obscurity, because the obscurity contains the light. The obscurity absorbs the light, contains the energy. Here we shall talk regarding the path of darkness, not the path of the light. Dubise, for that we go in Dubise, Galata Dubise, which is the book of Enoch, chapter 1, verse 474. And the manifestation of the will of Tete disentangled the path of light from the initial path of darknesses, comma. The entity of obscurity made his appearance and set in motion at his post according to the law established by Eyala Tete. Period. So, and he says, and the manifestation of the will of Tete, of the will of Loba, disentangled. When you disentangle, that means they were one. But he disentangled. He separated them. The path of light from the initial, because the path of obscurity, the path of darkness is the initial path. Comma. It's, for example, when there's an explosion. When there's an explosion, you see, with the smoke and everything, there's also like obscurity. Because obscurity contains the energy, contains the light. So, that darkness contains the light. And you're told, from the initial path of darknesses. Now, so the path of darkness is that path of darkness is also the same path where the 7 entities were set in motion. That's the initial path. And you're told here, the entity of obscurity made his appearance. So, we know that in the great order of things, there's no obscurity. So, who is the entity of obscurity? What is the entity of obscurity? How do you see obscurity in the great order of things? Because we know the entity of obscurity comes from the spiritual. And in the spiritual, you cannot penetrate in it with matter. So how do you see obscurity in the spiritual? Is it like a door or a breach to enter the visible? It's, for example, like water. When you see water, the ocean, in the ocean, it's like another world. To enter that world, you have to first enter water. You have to enter the surface. You have to enter the world and to see, to explore, see the creatures, and so on. So obscurity, it's similar. It's like a door. And for example, when you have a door, there's many parts of the door, right? On the door, there's many layers. For example, the door can be formed of many components. You can have metal, wood, you can have plastic, many parts that form one ensemble. So those different layers of the door, those are the multiverses. Because, for example, when you see the oceans, before you reach the bottom of the oceans, there's many layers. And on each layers, there's different temperatures, there's different pressure, it's a different state. It's not all the creatures that live on each layer. No. So those will represent, is similar to the multiverses. On the universe, there's many layers. Those layers are the multiverses. So, the entity of obscurity is the entity who is in charge of that obscurity, who control that obscurity. Dubicé, chapter 1, verse 506, he says, Moto, your ancestor was manifested, created, identical to us, spiritual DNA common to all non-visible beings, who are the entities of the great order of things. So it's going to be Dubicé 506 to 512. 507. He is also the life which bears a body, and this body is spiritual, a spirit similar to us, beings issued from beyond the non-visible, beyond the great veil non-visible. So, Moto, the first man, like I've mentioned, there's many dimensions. There's the physical dimension, the astral dimension, and then there's the spiritual dimension. So there's many realms, many realities. And you're told he is also life which bears a body. So and this body is spiritual, a spirit similar to us, beings issued from the great veil, from the non-visible great veil. Verse 508. It was this spirit that became the last spirit, Mudi, created entity, manifested in the great order of things. Semicolon. 509. Verse 509. And the visible body, physical of that spirit, who is the spiritual body of Moto, was manifested, created in the seventh of the visible, manifestation of the invisible and visible nature, exterior, period. I will repeat. And the visible body, physical, of that spirit, who is the spiritual body of Moto, the first man, was manifested, created in the seventh of the visible, manifestation of the invisible and visible nature, exterior. You have to understand, obscurity, true definition, is the exterior, because the interior is the great order of things, and the visible reality, the visible creation, that's the exterior. That's why, even regarding the Christ, he said, I will go and prepare a place. Prepare a place to you, for you, where? A place in the great order of things. Because that's the interior. So Moto, the first man, comes from the interior, comes from the great order of things. The spiritual entities, they come from the great order of things. They come from the inside, the house. And the sorting takes place outside. We sort who will enter and who will not. And that's that obscurity. And the obscurity hides. That's why Moto, the first man, was black. Because he will represent, his physical body will represent that exterior, that darkness. Will represent the outside. And he procreates through Muto, the first woman, and they have children, descendant, and the descendant comes out of him through Muto. And when people die, the physical body stays on earth, meaning you bury the body, but the spirit goes back to the initial place, because the spirit doesn't have an origin in the physical, from the visible. No, it goes back to the initial place. And the initial place is from beyond the great veil. So the darknesses hide things. That's why you don't bury the spirit, because it's not from the outside. So it goes back to the inside. That's why, like I've mentioned, when you sleep, you go to the obscurity. You go to the darkness. When you close your eyes, you cannot go beyond that. You cannot go beyond that darkness. You will still be, because that's the end. So and you're told here in verse 510, the visible side of Moto is manifested in order to experience the condition of the visible in the physical body through a link between his spirit and his body. Period. I'll repeat. The visible side of Moto is manifested in order to experience the condition of the visible in a physical body through a link between his spirit and his body. Verse 511, this link between his body and his visible body is a soul. So the soul is a link between the physical and the spirit. So that's why when you die, for those who are not in the word, who don't walk according to the path, when they die, they go in darkness, in obscurity. The soul goes back to that obscurity. It's like turned off, shut down. Verse 512. Thus, the skin of Moto, the skin of Moto's physical body, gives, during its formation, from the silt of the earth, the appearance of the color of obscurity, black, manifested from the union of our reflected shadows. From the union of our reflected shadow, period. So, that's why Moto could only have been black, because he represents that color of obscurity, of darkness. And you're told here, manifested from the union of our reflected shadow. What is the reflected shadow? Because when he says reflected, that means it's something that reflects, something that hits. And there's also reflection regarding consciousness. Because it's conscious. Bibèl dit, Origin, chapter 11, verse 5. And Mandaté dit, the entity, inclinated the visible heavens and descended, period. A dark mangaba, primordial ocean, tenebrous under the feet, period. There was thick obscurity under his feet, period. Mandaté dit, the entity, descended to exercise a sentence against the builders of the city and the pyramid that the uninitiated had built. So you're told here in verse 5 of Bibèl dit, Origin, that Mandaté dit, who is the entity, inclinated the visible heavens. What is the visible heavens? We're not talking about the sky here, no. And the heaven here is with the uppercase H. And descended. Those heavens, those are the multiverses. So which size does Mandaté dit, the entity, has to bend? When he says inclined, that means he bends the multiverses. Which size does he have? Because we know Mandaté dit, the entity of the great order of things, Doesn't come, it comes from the great art of things. So from the inside, the interior. And the interior doesn't necessarily has the same size as the exterior. That's why when the entity comes in the visible, they shrink. They bend the multiverses. They shrink, they reduce in size to enter the visible realm. So those heavens is not also the paradise regarding the realm, the kingdom of heaven. No. So he inclinates the heavens and he takes the passage. That's the passage. That's the initial path of darknesses. Dubicé, chapter 1, verse 837 and verse 838, he says, in verse 837, at that very instant, I, Dubicé, also saw Mutate di, Sunga, Raphael, Benengudi, Gabriel, Mene, Michael, and Moye, Uriel, inclinate the visible heavens and descended, semicolon. I saw a dark mangaba, primordial ocean, tenebrous under their feet. Verse 838. There was thick obscurity under their feet, comma, they descended and surrounded the elder of the two. So this is regarding when Dubicé saw the elder of the two, saw Jokisabe in a vision. And we know that Dubicé came way before Jokisabe in the visible. But Jokisabe, the true Christ, saw Dubicé, seeing him in a vision from the past. That means Jokisabe was beyond the law of time and space. He was in another consciousness. He was out of the law of the visible, out of the law of time and space. Dubicé saw what John Guanet, who is known in the current classical day Bible as John the Baptist, what John the Baptist didn't. He saw entities, Mutatedi, Sanga, Benengudi, Mene, Moye, inclinate the visible heavens. So they took the passage. And he saw a dark mangaba, primordial ocean, tenebrous under their feet. There was a thick obscurity under their feet. They descended and surrounded the elder of the two. Judge chapter 16, verse 81 and 82. He says, in the obscurity, Esombe way. Who is Esombe way? Esombe way is known in the current class of the Bible as Samson. Esombe way discovered the mystery of the power of the Mengu Mamadiba, water sirens, expert in the art of seduction, period. Verse 82. He also found in this obscurity the way of the source of their powers. So in Judge, you're told that in the obscurity, in a darkness, Esombe way discovered the mystery of the power of the Mengu Mamadiba, of the water siren, of those demons, expert in the art of seduction. Because some people, they want to fight demons, they want to pretend to fight evil spirit, but they don't even understand. They're afraid of the dark. They don't, and those spirits, those evil spirits, hide in the dark, act in the dark. And they hide to fight. And he also found in this obscurity the way of the source of their powers. 2 Samuel chapter 15 verse 7 to 11. It says, Mundima be koki se di. So that's the entity That's an entity of the great order of things. Mountima Bikok se dit also inclined the visible heavens and descended, comma. A dark Mangaba, primordial ocean, tenebrous under their feet. So there is a passage. And you have to understand that the obscurity, the darkness, it's a limit. It's a limit for man intelligence. It's a limit for men. Because whatever, let's say, space travel they will do, they will claim to do, or they will never be able to fully explore the universe. It's impossible for them. It's impossible for men. Because that's the limit. And they won't ever be able to go beyond that. Even when they make some movies regarding Marvels, Thanos, Galactus, all those type of beings that they will make, that they will try to represent, those beings will always be contained. They will always be inside. They will always be somewhere. They will always be in the universe. They will always be contained. Because man's imagination cannot go beyond that. Because that's the limit of man's intelligence. The darkness. The universe. Because it contains, in the universe there are codes. So that's why, for example, when somebody, for example, has an idea, sometimes they represent it with a light bulb that goes on, that's turned on. What does that represent? It represents that when you have an idea, you think, you're not inventing, you're not creating, you're not inventing something, no. You're only finding things that already exist, because in the darkness, information is already there. There are already codes of everything. The obscurity contains everything. For the visible, for man, whatever people are thinking, even in the future, what they will say they invented, all that already exists, all that is already contained in the universe. All they're doing is thinking, trying to find things that already exist. You're told here in verse 7, Mundima Bekok se dit, also inclined the visible heaven and descended, comma, a dark Mangaba, primordial ocean. Primordial ocean. What does that mean? We know that at the beginning of creation, water was used to make the universe, to make the multiverses, to make the earth, to make everything from that primordial water. Zula 100 gives us the revelation that the primordial water that was used, the primordial ocean that was used, some was used to make the multiverses, the circles, the multiverses, and so on. But there was a part that still remained, that still covers those multiverses, because it was only a part that was used to make the multiverses, the universe, and so on. So there's still a part that wasn't used, that's still there in this primordial form. That's why he says primordial ocean, because that water is still there in this initial form. Verse 8, there was thick obscurity under his feet, near a mighty Ebute Mundi. Period. Cherub. So that's a cherub. So near Mundima Bekok Sedi, there was under his feet near a mighty Ebute Mundi. Near. Because in the current classical Bible it says, it will claim that no, that so-called God, Yahweh, Lord, sits on a cherubim. Sit on Ebute Mundi, on a cherub. Well, if you sit on the cherub, that means you roughly have the same size. But it's not like that in Bibèl, Karatambali. Verse 9, and they parted behind the mysterious obscurity covering the very deep chasm above the primitive waters from beyond the great veil out of the universe. Verse 10, Moudima Bekoksedi and the Ebute Moudi came out of the obscurity, comma. They came out of obscurity. You have to understand that that obscurity contains light. Light cannot penetrate in there. Energy, the obscurity contains that energy. Contain energy, cosmic energy, and so on. Moudima Bekoksedi and the Ebute Moudi came out of the obscurity, comma. They were enveloped by the primitive and obscure waters and by dark, mysterious clouds. When people are going to read this, they won't understand. Like I've mentioned, at this place, light doesn't exist. For example, even in the universe, regarding the sun, if you are at a different place, at a different angle, you won't be able to see the light of the sun. The light of the sun doesn't penetrate, doesn't go everywhere in the universe. No, you have to be at a certain place to be able to see it. Because the further you go, if you are in a different place, there is obscurity. So the dark, mysterious clouds covers, you see, covers light. Because darkness covers, absorb. Verse 11, from the splendor which preceded them, comma, escaped living energies, comma, throwing lightning and burning coals of fire, semicolon. The bottom of the oceans was unveiled, comma, the foundation of the world appeared, period. So, we shall go now in Psalms chapter 97, verse 2. It says, the clouds and the obscurity hide his mysterious, hide his mysteries to the uninitiated, comma, white and mixed bloods, comma. Justice and equity are the basis of his verb. So that's why the scientists, the researchers, and so on, they'll come up with theories, with their opinions, but they won't ever be able to go beyond the darkness, beyond the great veil, because that's a limit, because they will still be contained. And you're told here that the clouds and obscurity hide mysteries. So that obscurity hide mysteries for the uninitiated, for the so-called scientists, because they cannot go beyond, they cannot comprehend. Because you have to understand that they will still be contained in time and space. They won't be able to go beyond that, because the darkness, the universe, contains time and space. Meaning the universe, obscurity, doesn't depend on the time and space. That's why the obscurity hides. For example, if you have a twin, and your twin go in the universe, and you are here, you will grow, you'll get old, and your twin in the universe won't. Because it's not the same time. The time of the universe contains the time. So here, the universe is not submitted to the time of the universe, because it contains it. Same as the terrestrial time, the time of the earth. The universe contains that. The times of the stars, the moon, the sun, it contains all that. So the obscurity contains. That's why even regarding the entities who are beyond time and space, beyond the visible realm, when they appeared, for example, if they appear to you, you will lose your strength, lose your vigor. Why? You will be weakened. Why? Let's say he doesn't absorb your power, because the entity, his time and your time are two different. You depend of the time of the visible. He doesn't. That's why when he appears to you, it's like he's absorbing the time that is around you. So it's gonna be like you're running through time. Like the entity is bringing you at this time. That's why you'll lose your strength, you'll lose your vigor, you'll lose your abilities, because it's like you're running through time and your condition is not made for that. So we shall go now in Psalms chapter 119, verse 105. It says, your verb, this verse is in the current classical Bible, is what the pastors like to take. It says here in Bibèl, your verb is a powerful radiance manifested under the manifestation of an incandescent torch at my spiritual feet, and an intelligible living light of incredible power on my path, which is the initial path of the mysterious obscurity of the entity of the great order of things. Period. So, when you accept the verb, you walk in the initial path of darkness. That's why you need the light. You need the torch. You need the verb to walk on that path. Because you have to be careful. Because there's darkness. Like I've mentioned, there are two paths. The path of light and the path of darkness. You also have to take the path of the light. But when you take the path of the light, after you cross, you're going to reach the path of the darkness, the initial path. And on that path, so the path of the obscurity, if you get lost there, that's the non-return. That's the no return, the path of no return. That's why you need the verb. Verse 8 in Isaiah chapter 48, verse 8. So, Wancha. By the manifestation of his will, he forms the mysterious light of the path of the inferior beings, who will have the grace to spiritually come to him, and he formed the initial path of darknesses, the initial path of darknesses. So you have to be on the path of the light. Once you reach, you go to the path of the mysterious path of the darknesses. Tobit, so Sangwaboam, chapter 8, verse 16. It says, I know all the paths that lead to Wase Epasimikondo, Southern Africa, because I went there very often by the initial path of darknesses, period. So here is an entity. I have crossed these plains and these mountains, all the passages are familiar to me. So there are many passages, but the entities, they take the initial path of darknesses. That's why in the beginning of men in the beginning, in the origin, they had the ability to see in the dark. But because of the manifold, because of what will take place later on, they lost, that ability was removed. That's why today they will try to use, they'll try to make equipment, night vision and so on, to be able to see, to be able to reproduce that ability. So, what is, well, obscurity is, you have to understand, obscurity is the matrix of creation, is a support to manifest the visible, and is a passage that man had to take to travel to the other side, to go to the other side, to go to the interior. Because the interior is the great order of things. And to access, you have to take the path, take the passage. And the passage is that obscurity. That's why even regarding the Christ, Joki Sabe says, you are of this world, not me, because he's not from the exterior. So that was the teaching, that was the message regarding the mystery of obscurity, the origin of darknesses. All glory be to Lopa, the only and unique Creator.